My name is Tim Allston. Leadership. This is your main emerging leaders manage themselves first and foremost. I'm your host, I'm a leadership author, and I'm a recovering ego-holic. But today, I've got a brand. I ain't crazy about it, but I've got to be honest and share it with you. I'm not just I'm a recovering diabetic ego-holic. And there are some different dimensions there, but maybe not necessarily. Just want to say, as I always do, that on our show, the 10 Commandments of Leadership, which is a daily weekday show, we have two primary objectives, and those objectives are to educate, to equip, and to empower emerging leaders with God-thought leadership. God-thought leadership. And our second objective is to present current events and newsmakers in the light of biblical best practices. In the light of biblical best practices from the Bible. And today is going to be no exception. I mean, we're really going to zero in on a very, very current theme. And I've got to admit, it's a little bit personal, but I need to share it with you because it may help you to heal as, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I think I shared with you some of this information before, so therefore I kind of need to give you an update. This afternoon's episode is entitled, When the Doctor Becomes the Patient. Ego-holism, humility, and the diabetes wake-up call. Ego-holism, humility, and the diabetes wake-up call when the doctor becomes the patient. 6 weeks ago, my nurse practitioner said words that I never, ever expected to hear. She said, Tim, your A1C is 6.7. You are now in the diabetic range. Now, for someone who eats clean, works out every day, and once proudly wore the badge of plant-based above average, this was a humbling blow. This is when the ego met diagnosis. I wouldn't even tell my wife immediately what the nurse practitioner said. It wasn't because I didn't love her, but because in my arrogance, I needed 24 hours to mourn my ego. The Apostle Paul called himself chief among sinners, and that day I understood exactly what he meant. You see, I wasn't above the crowd. I was the crowd. And once I told my wife, my brilliant, loving, retired, licensed respiratory therapist wife, naturally and immediately she changed. Not into a counselor. Don't I wish. She turned into a Marine drill sergeant. I mean, every time I crept toward the refrigerator, there she was, with the same old lines. Sweetheart, you know you can't eat that. Didn't you ask me to hold your feet to the fire? Honey, are we in this together or what? At first, I just wanted to silence her. Then one morning, clearly, Tim, you're not just a recovering ego-holic, you are a recovering diabetic ego-holic. I knew what he meant. So I took out my ego-holism recovering framework that I had taught others for years, and I laid a piece of what I call spiritual tracing paper over my diagnosis. And the doctor now had to become the patient. Same process, same commandments, but now applied to my body. Here's what I mean. First step in the process, those first primary pre-steps, TOP. T, target the problem. First, I had to admit it out loud, not just to my wife, but to my friends, my colleagues, my fellow churchgoers. I had to say to them, yes, I am now diabetic. It was humbling. It was painful, but it was necessary. As the American novelist James Baldwin once said, you cannot fix what you will not face. You cannot fix what you will not face. So after T targeting the problem, I had to O own the problem. It wasn't genetics. It wasn't geography, although I live in Alabama, which is in the heart of America's diabetes belt. It wasn't even fruit juice, although that's now on my wife's banned list. It was me, my patterns, my choices, my stewardship. And after T, targeting, and O, owning, then P, I had to proceed to action. And that's where those 7 Tim commandments of ego-holic and recovering steps came in. Those 7 steps now apply to my diabetes. For example, step 1, change lanes to move forward. I'm going to tell you, those late night NBA Finals games almost derailed me. Those late night cravings during those West Coast games. But I took a page out of Magic Johnson's book. Try to get in bed by 8:30 p.m. and then up by 4:30 a.m. More sleep equals fewer temptations. More sleep, fewer temptations. Number 2, recovering step number 2, dig below the surface to uncover hidden treasures. I realized, and this was a bitter pill to swallow, folks, I realized that I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. I had another disease, and this was a crippling disease, and this is probably one of the biggest diseases in humankind. I believe more people are injured and die, not from heart disease, not even from diabetes, but they're injured irreparably by the disease called comparisonitis. That disease where you say, for example, in this case, well, I'm healthier than most. But in the disease of comparisonitis, you never win. Never win. I needed to aim higher. Why? Because I knew better. And then there was step 3, become an active listener. Now, this was different. Become an active listener. I then began to listen with my eyes by reading product labels. My eyes became my new ears. I learned, for example, that sugar wears many different disguises. Glucose, fructose, natural flavors. My wife became my live-in translator, but I had to listen and obey. Step 4 said, grow up to be like a child. My meals got smaller like a child. My appetite, and as a result, my appetite got smaller as a child. Food was no longer my comfort. It was my assignment. I learned again what we as children learned early. You don't need as much food as you think you need. Step 5, turn your bitter lemons into bitter lemonade, but not into the best, which is the lemon meringue pie. No, I didn't eat lemon meringue pie. But then again, here's key. I no longer craved it. Yeah, no longer craved it. Over time, my body stopped asking for what it didn't need. And that was growth. That was maturity. Step 6 says, recovering step number 6 says, healing through revealing. I started tracking my blood pressure, my weight, and my steps again. But it was now with a mission in mind, not for vanity. It was for survival. And then finally, step number 7 is now that you know, go, elevate, grow. At my 6-week follow-up appointment yesterday, my nurse practitioner reported to me that my A1C had dropped from a 6.7 to a 6.4, out of the diabetic range. Hallelujah. My blood sugar had dropped from a 93 to an 81. The scale showed I actually had lost 4 pounds, and my nurse practitioner gave me an A+ in my appointment. Victory! Victory! But only for 6 hours. That day I ran home and told my wife, nurse, you did it! You did it, nurse. She smiled, we hugged, and we prayed. But then I remembered Don Shula's 24-hour rule. Don Shula, you may remember, was that legendary coach in pro football. He coached the Miami Dolphins to the only undefeated season in pro football history. They went 17-0, including winning the Super Bowl championship that year in 1973. But what he is most remembered for, people like me and other recovering ego-holics and emerging leaders, is there's the Don Shula 24-hour rule. And that rule is whether you win or lose, you get 24 hours to celebrate or commiserate. Then it's time to get back to work. As a recovering diabetic ego-holic, I didn't need 24 hours. 6 hours was plenty, because this isn't a goal. This is a lifestyle. And I want to retire my wife's Marine Sergeant and her nurse's uniform permanently. So to those who are also battling ego or diabetes or both, I want to assure you that you're not alone. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. Let me say that again. You don't have to be perfect. I ain't. You just have to be present in your body, in your spirit, in your truth. Hey, this is Tim Allston, a recovering ego-holic and now a recovering diabetic ego-holic, reminding you that healing isn't a moment. Healing is a mindset. And one of the key things I say to myself, and this is important, I'm glad to be victorious. I'm glad to have reached that point where I am no longer a diabetic. I'm now in that pre-diabetic range. But here's the challenge, and you've heard me talk about it before. Our biggest defeats come after our biggest victories. Celebration, we let our guard down, and we spend too much time fist bumping and high-fiving each other. That's why I would only allow myself 6 hours of celebration. But I'm back on this track again. I'm back. I want to get those numbers down even further. I want to get that even further. I want to get out of the pre-diabetic range. I need to lose some of my exercise routine. I'm into my dietary routine. Water has become my favorite correction, my only beverage that I drink. I never thought that would happen. Thank God for fruit-flavored waters, fruit-flavored water beverages. I'm going to get there. As the old hymn says, each victory will help you some other to win. I hope that you've gotten from my journey. I'm still recovering from ego-holicism. I'm still recovering from diabetes. I'm now at the pre-diabetic stage, which can be dangerous because you can become prematurely self-satisfied in this process. But my wife and I are going to win, and I can't wait to tell you the victory story. This has been a short victory. This is a sprint. We're going for the marathon. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking with us. And if you've been encouraged, inspired, or informed by what you've heard, like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you tomorrow with another issue of the 10 Commandments of Leadership. Bye-bye.